Alderman Ian Campbell, who was on the board of the HTA, says the authority has been trying to find out why its funding has been cut for the past 3 months.
We've been trying to get an answer from the Director of the Department of Tourism, and we've just had no success whatsoever. We've been told, in fact, by the Director that he won't even speak to us.
How heavily does the association depend on the funding from the government?
It relies quite markedly, although the major source of our funds is from private enterprise, but at the same time this to us is almost a vote of no confidence from the government and from the Department of Tourism in the efforts that we've been putting into the local scene. And
Members of the Hunter Region Bowling and Recreation Club for Disabled at Wall's End today voted to accept an Executive Committee recommendation that the club be closed. The reason? Basically a lack of funds to keep going. Over the 12 months the club has been in existence in the council-owned premises, it has been funded almost entirely by public donations. In that 12 months, the club has raised just over $3,500, but with an estimated budget of almost $10,500 for the next year, it was impractical to stay open. Today was a sad occasion for the Disabled Bowling Club's Vice President, Brian Thomas, and the 15 or so members out of 41 who attended the meeting. But as Honorary President Phil McIntosh has pointed out, the end of the club was also due to the apathetic response from the potential users of the facilities.
In Newcastle, coal exports strangled by the rail strike regained some lost momentum, with trains unloading coal at Port Waratah throughout the day. During the rail strike there was an increase in the road haulage of coal, but this was not enough to maintain stockpiles at the loader. The first of several delayed ships into port today was the Diane Glory, which has begun loading 100,000 tonnes of coking coal for Korea. Loading operations will continue throughout the weekend.
Interest in the local industry, which tourism figures show is more popular with those who travel from interstate than with those in its own backyard.
All 6 girls from Pandora's who travelled to Adelaide to compete came back with trophies. Julie Buxton came in at 3rd place in the senior styling section. Julie is a veteran of both national and international competitions, having competed in the Asian Pacific titles in Hong Kong earlier this year. She says preparing for such an event takes months.
It probably takes us a couple of months to even decide on what we're going to do, and then a couple of months after that to get it absolutely perfect.
What are the latest trends in hairdressing at the moment?
In cutting, a lot of colouring, not just one basic colour, using, tone-on-tone shades up to 3-4 different colours. I think cutting's returning, probably for summer you'll notice a lot more looks, like going back to sort of bobs and wedges and that type of thing, but, on a slightly different line to what they were, about 5 years ago.
What does winning the award mean to the salon?
Means we're the best.
Those claims were made at a discussion group of the Newcastle branch of the Industrial Relations Society of New South Wales. 2 members of that society, including Mr Hugh Selby from Sydney, were sent to Japan to take part in the International Industrial Relations Congress. During their stay, they were able to examine Japan's system, which has been promoted as something superior to our own. How true are those claims? According to Mr Selby, Japan's system of industrial relations is not nearly as good as it is made out to be.
The commonly received view that we get here would have us all believe that Japanese industrial relations is a perfect model, something that we should all be copying, something that if we did copy here would lead to higher Australian productivity, a happier Australian workforce. And the view that I'll be putting is that first of all the Japanese system is not nearly as good as it's made out to be. Secondly, that it's not copyable from Japan to Australia. And third, that once you knew about it, you wouldn't want to copy it anyway.
So you feel we have nothing to learn from it?
In terms of industrial relations, nothing at all. In terms of interpersonal communication, we could learn a lot. In terms of improving productivity, we could learn a lot, but that's quite distinct from industrial relations as a relationship that exists between management on the one hand and the workforce on the other.
The idea to hold the meeting was put forward last night by Alderman Alma Tate. The Works Committee has taken up the suggestion of a meeting involving the Hunter District Water Board, the Council, the State Pollution Control Commission, the Health Commission and residents involved in the Clean Water Committee.
We have a very disturbed community about our beaches at the moment, and it does seem that the bringing together of these various departments would be beneficial to us as a council and also for the public at large to know more and to understand more about the limits to which each department can go. And I believe by bringing the Water Board and the Health Commission and the council together, we will then be able to define our boundaries, and when we are asked as aldermen what we're doing about it, we will know just what is in our capacity and which way to go.
Thank you.
Yes, a number of the colts from last year have been brought up in the senior squad, namely Andrew Butler for one, who's the opening bat, Peter Chapman and Doug Elphick, who are wicket keepers, and who will be pressing for spots this year.
Because that's one spot, the wicket-keeping job, that was open to discussion at the end of the year. Kerry Thompson announced his retirement last year, but I believe Tomo's backing up again.
Yes, there's 2 people announced their retirement last year in the squad. Kerry Thompson and Michael Hill, who was the captain last year, is also announced in the squad, which has been announced tonight.
And as Dennis explains, a lot of the experienced players have been retained.
Yes, well, Rick McCosker there, who, of course, he was captain of the state team last year and announced his retirement. He'll be obviously leading the squad.
And what about the fixtures? Have they a fairly heavy representative fixture coming up this year?
Well, the seniors have already got games against Illawarra and ACT in November, and they'll also be playing the Tilly's Challenge Cup match again. And in the Colts, there's matches against the Southern Zone and also against Metropolitan in January.
And will Newcastle get another Sheffield Shield fixture this coming season?
Well, unofficially, we have been told that we'll have a game, but we're still waiting for official word.
Thanks, John. Good morning. Well, I suppose we have to expect mornings like this. After all, it is winter. It's rather cold down here at the moment. Showery conditions about the coast. A rising swell low from the south and waves around 1.5 metres for the board riders. There's really no value to speak of at the moment because wind's blowing from the south, making conditions quite choppy and bumpy. And the swell, even though it is coming, is rather fresh and it's rather bumpy within itself. So the conditions around our open beaches aren't looking very good at all at the moment. It's just a big mess. And if you're super keen on looking for waves, you'll have to look towards those southern protected corners where the swell's going to be quite a deal smaller, but at least there will be some protection from the wind. The rather unfortunate thing about all of this is that I would expect all of the beaches from Merewether Bar Beach later in the day to be closed due to pollution. If you'd like to go for a swim today, all of our city beaches have strong sweeps to the north and bad rips, so it looks like baths only. And now the weather forecast reads cool to cold and cloudy. Showers mainly in the lower Hunter. A strong wind warning is current for southwest to southerly winds, strengthening to 20 to 30 knots on the coast, that's 40 to 60 kilometres per hour, but lighter inland. Seas rising to moderate to rough, on a swell increasing to moderate. Newcastle expecting a top today of only 14 degrees, a cool 12 degrees for Scone. Low tide will be at 11:28 this morning, 0.6 of a metre. The following high tide at 6:13 this evening, 1.6 metres. The outlook for Friday, a few showers with winds easing. Well, there you have it. A very wintry day coming up for Newcastle. A top of 14 degrees, showers along the coast, strong southerly winds. For the board riders, an increasing swell from the south, waves up to 1.5 metres at the moment, likely to get a little bigger during the day, and hopefully some good waves coming up for the weekend. Have a great day, take it easy on the wet roads. Bye for now.
There are times when all you want or need from the theatre is a rip-roaring laugh, and Noises Off certainly fits that bill marvellously. Using the device of a play within a play, Noises Off takes us not once, twice, but 3 times through the first act of an excruciatingly awful English farce, wittily called Nothing On, as performed by a touring company who are quite second-rate. Noises Off charts the complete disintegration of both the play and the cast as the season progresses. First time around we see the first act of Nothing On at its final rehearsal, where all is sweetness and light and really the only problem is the incompetence of the cast. Second time around, about a month later, we see the act from backstage, where tempers are getting badly frayed and mayhem rules the wings. This was a wonderful piece of sustained madness. Third time around, we see the first act again, but from the front, where the actors have brought their antagonism on stage and desperately try and successfully try to sabotage each other's performances. The device of using excellent actors to play bad actors who are playing even worse characters gives the opportunity to drag out a whole swag of well-worn jokes, devices, characters and situations. But the surprising thing is that Noises Off manages to make them look exceedingly fresh. A play like Noises Off depends almost entirely on its performances, and when you have actors of the calibre of Stuart Wagstaff, Barry Creighton, Frank Wilson and the marvellous Jill Perryman, well, you know you're in very good hands. And of course, they're only the big names. It was a wonderful group performance. Well, it's hectic, funny and with beautiful performances. Well, Noises Off is just a great night out at the theatre.
still have to go to Sydney if they need radiotherapy, but at least now surgery can be performed and chemotherapy administered in Newcastle. Dr. Stewart has had many years of experience in chemotherapy, having spent time in England studying the treatment. It's a therapy that can have some harmful side effects, such as nausea and causing the patient's hair to fall. So how does it combat cancer?
Chemotherapy is drug treatment that affects rapidly dividing cells. The drugs are taken up into the cell and usually integrated into the genetic mechanism of the cell and affect some process of cell division, and subsequently, following failure of the malignant cell to divide, the cells will usually die.
Mrs. Jean Daniels from Muswellbrook had breast cancer. She underwent surgery and received radiotherapy. Now she is undergoing a 12-month course of chemotherapy. After going through the 3 main treatments for cancer, has she noticed any side effects?
I've been one of the fortunate people. I haven't had any side effects whatsoever. I haven't had sickness or anything like that, but I believe you can be nauseous and hair falling out, things like this, but so far so good with me. So I can count my blessings.
Thanks, John. Good morning. 4 degrees, a nice cold start to the day. Nice and crisp out here this morning. Rather clear along the beaches, the wind blowing from the west and waves very small. The wind swell of yesterday's very quickly disappeared. Waves are quite small, around 1 metre at most of the open beaches. Conditions with the offshore wind nice and smooth and glassy, and waves for the board rider look like being quite reasonable, at least on the lower tide. I'd say from half tide to low and half tide going back out towards high. It should be reasonable waves at all of the open beaches, bearing in mind that the sandbanks haven't been very good for the last couple of weeks since that rather big swell we had. If you'd like to go for a swim today, most of our city beaches are quite safe. The water is freezing. And as far as the weather's concerned, the forecast for today reads morning frosts and fog patches inland, cool to mild and mostly sunny day but cloudy on the coast. Southwest to southeasterly winds at 10 to 20 knots, that's 20 to 40 kilometres per hour, and seas becoming slight on a low to moderate swell. Newcastle expecting 16 degrees, a top of 14 degrees for Scone. Low tide will be at 13 minutes past midday at 0.5 of a metre. High tide at 6:56 this evening, 1.7 metres. And the outlook for the weekend, dry with morning frosts and light winds. Well, that's the story. Small waves for the board rider, around 1 metre at the open beaches. Offshore winds, at least partly, or at least for part of the day, probably for most of the morning. If the winds get around to the southeast, conditions this afternoon will become choppy. I wouldn't expect the swell to get too much bigger, so it looks like being small waves for most of the weekend, and those winds should get back around to the west over most of the weekend as well. Have a great day, whatever you're doing. A top of 16 degrees. Back again on Monday morning.